Now, as we've mentioned, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to be greeted by protests when he arrives in Australia later this week. 60 prominent Australians have written an open letter opposing the visit, saying Mr Netanyahu's policies provoke, intimidate and oppress the Palestinian people.
Earlier, we spoke to the president of the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, George Browning, one of the signatories to that letter. Now we're joined by Jamie Hyams. He's from the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Jamie, a very good morning to you.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning.
This isn't rent-a-crowd we're talking about. We've got a former federal court judge, George Browning, a former Anglican archbishop, Janet Holmes a Court, one of Australia's most prominent business people, the former Solicitor General of Australia, Gavin Griffiths, all saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu's policies, in their words, provoke, intimidate and oppress the Palestinian people. How do you respond to that?
Well, it is very disappointing petition, and most of the 60 people are prominent Palestinian activists rather than prominent Australians, I would say. But look, I think if you read the words of the petition, it's like everything that Benjamin Netanyahu and everything that Israel has ever done is happening in a complete vacuum. It completely ignores the fact that Israel took the West Bank in a defensive war in 1967 and immediately offered to return most of the land but was rebuffed, and has made 3 very generous peace offers since then that have been completely refused by the Palestinians. And what you've had since Benjamin Netanyahu's second term of prime ministership is repeated gestures to try and make peace with the Palestinians, such as releasing prisoners with blood on their hand and freezing settlements, building and so on. And on the Palestinian side, you've got a complete refusal to negotiate in good faith, murderous incitement that has led to the stabbings and vehicle attacks that we've seen over the past year, and encouragement of terrorism by paying the families of killed terrorists very generous pensions, and those that are captured and held in Israeli jails get very generous pensions for the rest of their lives.
At the same time, we've had the Prime Minister's government passing that law retrospectively legalising lots of settlements built on privately owned Palestinian land.
Yeah, well, we actually oppose that law as well. We think it's very counterproductive, and there's a very good chance it'll be overturned by the Israeli Supreme Court.
Excuse me for interrupting. It's part of a pattern, though. I mean, these settlements have been ruled repeatedly by international bodies as contravening international law.
Yeah, well, various international bodies have said that, but you have to understand the politics that's inherent in all the international bodies, where there's a massive, overwhelming majority of, I guess, anti-Israeli countries. It is, with the current law, for example, what needs to be taken into account is that while it's counterproductive, it also does say that any land that the settlements are built on, that's private land, the Palestinians will get yearly rents that add up to well over the value of that land. So it's not
the same as owning a land, though, is it?
No, it's not. And like I said, it is a counterproductive law. But in the overall scheme of things, settlements are one obstacle and one issue that needs to be resolved, but they're certainly not the main issue when, various peace offers have been made that wouldn't have stopped, the settlements wouldn't have stopped happening. And of course, before 1967, there were no settlements and there was still no peace. Yeah,
and I hear you. I mean, the settlements are one thing stopping a peace deal. The suicide bombings as well are another big thing stopping a peace deal as well. Therefore, what do you make of that clear move from that meeting last week between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump away from this still very much elusive two-state solution?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it was a clear move. I don't know that you can necessarily say that anything that Donald Trump says in his sort of offhand way is absolutely clear. But I think the message he was trying to put across was that he, as the United States president, is not going to take the tack that Obama took, which is to try and force a resolution on the two parties. He's going to leave it to them to sort out. And that's consistent with the Oslo Accords that called for peace and a two-state solution through direct negotiations. So he's saying if the parties don't want a two-state solution, he's not going to make them have it. But, the Palestinians have now come out and very strongly in favour of a two-state solution, and it would be nice to see them actually following that up with concrete steps to negotiate instead of refusing to negotiate. And Benjamin Netanyahu has many times said that he favours a two-state peace. He has reservations about it at the moment because, of course, what happened when Israel withdrew from Gaza was that Israel was attacked by tens of thousands of rockets, terror tunnels and so on, and that's bad enough down in the south of the country. But if that was to happen, if Israel was to withdraw from the West Bank and someone like Hamas was to take over there, Israel's whole heartland and population centres would be subject to that and the whole country would shut down.
OK. So, yeah, that debate continues. Now, let's talk before we go, Jamie, about this visit overall by the Prime Minister, the first by a serving Israeli Prime Minister since 1948, very significant. What does the Jewish community here hope to achieve or hope is achieved from that visit?
Well, you know, Australia and Israel are very good partners when it comes to a whole lot of trade and strategic issues. Australia recognises Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East, the only country in the Middle East that shares our egalitarian and democratic values. So we would hope to see an increasing of the strong ties between our two countries in terms of trade and strategic. And we've got a lot to learn from Israel in terms of cybersecurity and defence and so on, that we really need to pick up on, given the changing world that we're in at the moment. And Israel could teach us a lot of that, as well as you know, start-up and agricultural technology and a whole raft of things that we could really benefit from in Australia.
Jamie Hyams from the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.